Bryant Goulding is the co-founder of Cincinnati's Rhinegeist Brewing, which has quickly grown into one of the country's largest craft breweries in just 5 years. His company is still outpacing category growth, up over 20% this year, and I think maybe Carrie might have alluded to it on the last panel, or no, maybe it was the panel before. So, David had alluded to a brewery that's approaching 100,000 barrels, and that would be Bryant's brewery. And growth like that comes at a cost, and Bryant is here to talk about what it takes to build a modern craft brewery like Rhinegeist that is scaling fast. So over the next 40 minutes, he's going to discuss his growth story. He's going to talk about the craft brewery that he thought he was building in the early days and how the vision of what his company will become has sort of morphed over the years to include some ventures like a distribution operation, a freight business, and even a construction company. There aren't really many craft breweries or any craft breweries that I know of that run their own freight businesses and truck their own beer to faraway markets, but that is now essential to how Rhinegeist operates. And over the years, Bryant has demonstrated an ability to develop creative solutions to dozens of problems, and he's empowered individuals from inside and outside of his organization to oversee some of the more non-traditional areas of the business. So come on up here, Bryant, and tell us all about it. Round of applause.
Howdy. Thanks for having me up here, Chris. Yeah, we started talking about, I think this was at CBC in Nashville, looking at top-line growth, the industry is slowing, but yet there's so many vibrant stories of tribes that are being successful out there. What's that magic mixture? What's the je ne sais quoi about strong brands? So I figured I would talk a little bit about what we've experienced at Rhinegeist as analogous to, I think, how a lot of breweries that have opened up, thousands of them in the last few years, run by millennials, many of them. I'm at the cusp of early age millennial, being born in 1981, and our mean age of employee, there are now 300 of us, is 31 to 32 years old. So I think it's a cool space where a lot of companies are challenged with how to deal with millennials, and we just are millennials, as a lot of our customers are, and I think that our growth has kind of showcased some of that. So I'll briefly go into our history of Rhinegeist. I was a home brewer working for Accenture in San Francisco when I met my business partner, Bob. He hired me to work at Fair Isaac, and we were doing marketing analytics research and consulting, and really both frustrated with delivering projects that never really came to fruition, never added up to anything. And he quit to move to Cincinnati and did a locational analysis of what cities in the Midwest would make sense to build an artisanal coffee business. Moved to Cincinnati in 2007 and opened up Tazamia, a little coffee roastery. 2007 was one of the toughest times you could open a business because people were carving out all sorts of things, including coffee, out of their budget as the recession slipped in. But he found Cincinnati a really compelling place and stayed in touch with me as I quit the consulting business and got into selling beer for Anderson Valley in Napa, Sonoma, Lake, and Mendocino counties, and then eventually Dogfish Head, where I was one of 8 regional sales managers nationally managing 5 states at a time where a lot of rocket ship success stories were happening. You know, in 2006 or 7, Green Flash and Ballast Point were the same 15,000 barrels, and very different growth strategies. Watching that happen was a really good way to kind of see the business. We got to Cincinnati. Bob called me up on my birthday and didn't know it was my birthday and said, "Hey, I've got a coffee business going, but I'm living in this over-the-Rhine town that is really beautiful, and you got to come check it out." So I said, "There's no way I'm leaving San Francisco. I love it out there. I'm living in a very vibrant place, but I'll come check it out." And what I came to see is this amazing city of Cincinnati was rich with brewing history. There were more than 50 breweries before Prohibition. The building that we eventually ended up going into was 100 years old and was producing over 300,000 barrels of beer back before Prohibition. Prohibition shut it down. And there was an emergent, beautiful Italian architecture, and it felt like Williamsburg 25 years ago. And that palpable opportunity to kind of bring beer back to a city that cared for it so and had such a rich history, and actually breathing life back into this archaic bones of a brewery, we thought was really great. So we wanted to bring beer back to Cincinnati, build a strong connection with community and customers, Strong brand mark, clean, distinctive branding, and this building that has 45-foot ceilings, skylights in the roof, 25,000 square foot was our original tasting room. The total square footage is 120,000 square feet. We're right downtown. Eventually, Cincinnati built a streetcar where you can hop out from our brewery and go downtown to the ballparks and really allow the city of Cincinnati to embrace this blank slate as a old brewery that is coming back to life and is bigger than imaginable and bigger than you can build today. And I think that has allowed people to create a really rich emotional connection, from weddings to birthday parties to graduations to disco. We throw crazy anniversary parties and dad plaid parties, and we built a rooftop deck and an event space and an annex and eventually a restaurant that people come and share great experiences with their friends and family and then leave with Rhinegeist embedded in their heart, I think, a little bit deeper. Create meaningful work. The antithesis of consulting and dropping off paradigms of what you can do better or how you can deliver value, really creating a product that you can stand behind. There's a vivacity in the craft beer industry that is you can see and is palpable. We stand behind a product. It's compelling, it's creative, it's delicious, it brings people together. And we wanted to create an environment that was the opposite of what we experience in the corporate world and really listen to employees and give people meaningful work to feel good about and go home at the end of the day. Lots of high fives and a culture of entrepreneurial thinking, an idea meritocracy where we really invest in feedback mechanisms and communication and make sure that people feel heard, they feel supported and challenged, and they can really make an impact. And I think we've done that to a great degree. So our growth story, which I'll blast through, any brewery worth their merit has to focus on quality, consistency, and innovation. I don't think that's distinctive for us, but Jim Matt, our head brewer, who started out with us, was a chemist for 25 years and an avid home brewer, and built Sun King's quality control before he came to Cincinnati, and we brought him on board. We were hoping to bring a West Coast brewer that knew the late hop additions and the hop character that we wanted to deliver to Cincinnati, but we ended up finding someone in Cincy who had the chemical background. And consistency was one of the true to brand methodology of thinking about what we wanted to do, and if it's not what we wanted, we would dump the beer and not hesitate. And innovation, having been in the space of craft beer where all sorts of beer is happening and hops and styles from history and coming up with your own, what we knew would be a part of things as we grew. And then focused on building close relationship with accounts. You can self-distribute to 1 million barrels in Cincinnati and in the state of Ohio, and we knew that we would really invest in those relationships. We bought some Sprinter vans. We bought a used one from Sun King, which had a side door where it would open when you didn't know it would, and spit kegs out on the side of the road occasionally, which they kind of got the better of us on that one. But they were kind of mentors for us on how important building great relationships were in core markets. And you make your own mistakes. You can set a really high level of customer service, excuse me, with sales and then with delivery. There's no finger pointing back and forth. It's really just you in getting feedback directly from your customers and figuring out where your brand fits within their business model. And balancing innovation and brand building. Truth was our IPA. We named it Truth because the world didn't need another IPA at all, but we felt like there was space for a great IPA in the Midwest. And then innovation, which gives you relevance in rotational accounts as well as a creative outlet. We really spend a lot of time focused on, when we build out our sales goals, on building brands like Truth, Cheetah, and Bubbles that we have, as well as innovation. We launch more than 100 beers each year, and that balance is really important. You can't forget about what keeps the lights on and what true powerful brands are. And I think there's a really rare space where there are bar call brands out there where people can just shout a Truth or Bubbles in a noisy bar and end up getting served that. And a persistent voice. We post somewhere around 40 things on social media, piece of content each week. And I was originally our marketing person, and I was doing all the social media, and it's now on our about to be fourth iteration of managing that voice. And the way that I ascribed to them how to manage that was as if you were a father and anything happening in the brewery was your 2-year-old toddler, and you were captivated by what they were learning and how they were struggling and the beauty of each of these moments, because there's all of these these storylines playing out each day. And I think that level of excitement and creativity and celebration of what we get to do and the beauty of working in craft beer and sharing that with that intimate connection with our consumers is really powerful. And then keeping people up to date when people are spending, I don't know, pick up your iPhone and swipe to the left and scroll to the bottom, and it tells you screen time and how much screen time you're using. I'm at like just shy of 3 hours. When you're spending that much time on your phone, that's where you need to tell your brand story. I worry about what that means for consumption, but we'll get to there. And define markets tightly to penetrate sustainably. This is something that I'm going to go through visually about. We've grown to 100,000 barrels at the end of this year in 5 years, but we've done that very intentionally and focused on markets, not statewide or regions or many states at once, but really a city at a time and plugging someone in to make an impact there. In 2013, we opened up. We had a canning line. We didn't use it that year. We opened in June, and we were open 6 months. We focused on draft beer. We focused on over the Rhine, which was our emerging neighborhood. Rhinegeist means goes to the Rhine, spear the Rhine, so we focused there. In 2014, we started delivering beer up into Dayton. We had Sprinter vans that were sitting dormant on Mondays, so we had a guy sell Thursday, Friday, and we would deliver beer up there on Mondays and make sense of the assets that we had invested in. We went into Cannes Super Bowl weekend of 2014 with just 2 brands, and then we're pretty much out of stock as people were really excited about the brand. 2015, we rolled out a distributor called River Ghost in Kentucky, which then became illegal a few months later. So we sold the distribution rights to Heidelberg Distributing and worked with them there. They built a craft team into their space, and then rolled out a self-distribution small brew house and warehouse in Columbus, doubling down on our connection with cities and really breaking out all of our sales reps into key neighborhoods in and around the Columbus area. We're now a 15 share in Columbus, and I think that's a tribute to the connection that we have with accounts there. Grew into Toledo and Lorraine and put people in each of those markets. And then in order to get our teeth kicked in and really learn about how hard it can be to tell your brand story far, far away, I grew up in New England and really had a lot of respect for the Massachusetts beer market, beer advocates up there. They've thrown great craft beer festivals, and we felt like if we're a brand that's can roll, let's go to one of the toughest markets. And we had initially planned on doing Massachusetts and New York, and we ended up rolling out Massachusetts and realizing this is way too much. We've got one guy up there with a leadership support, and it's really hard to grow up there. It's hard to get your story across, especially in such a dynamic market. We filled out the rest of the state of Ohio, rolled out Cleveland, paired with a really powerful wholesaler up there that had a very small craft portfolio, hit 56,000 barrels in 2016. We rolled out parts of Indiana, and then Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh only in last year, approaching 86,000 barrels. And then this year we filled out a few counties, but we really didn't grow. We spent this year feeling like we had innovation preloaded that we could get to the growth amount that we wanted, and we really started to focus on what does leadership mean for us? How do we rebuild communication between our teams, and how do we start better understanding who we are as a brand? Because we've been pretty allergic to the corporate feel of like building brand values or a motto. But now we're 5 years in and we've lived this, so we kind of know what we stand for. So let's spend time indoctrinating our people with that. One of the things that was really challenging here is the bottlenecks and pain points through time. Going from 2014 to 2015, we had a cask 5-head canning line, which I'm sure other brewers have. It was running basically around the clock to service 31,000 barrels of beer. And our packaging team was running around the clock. It was breaking all the time because they're not made to be run that way. And that was just a real burnout mode that it took us a while to order a can line and get it implemented, which we did in 2016, at which point we had the same brewing team brewing around the clock 6 days a week that was brewing 30,000 barrels, brewing 56,000 barrels. And we lost a couple of them. And then we got feedback that we can't do this anymore. This is too much. This production, flipping a tank that we used to get 2 hours to do, we have to do in 20 minutes. And we had kind of taken our eye off the ball, I think, a little bit on what was happening internally, not from a quality or a consistency standpoint, but from a resource support, because we were growing so much out there in the market. those were critical learnings. So growth can be really hazardous to culture. So what's that meant for us as we move forward? We've worked to really hire believers, hire people that are fueled by passion for beer, hire people that share your values. And I think we haven't codified them. It's not a checklist, but in an interview, you get a feel, and we've been really hands-on with that and focused on trying to tease out what people care about and how well they fit. And we end up with a lot of creative, hardworking people. Listen to and invest in employees. The invest in employees is key. Pay them well. The listen to is create feedback mechanisms that really mean that people feel heard, they feel challenged, and they feel like their ideas are impacting the outcome of the business, which is really critical. Promote from within. Upward mobility is really important. You're going to lose people if they feel like they're not going to grow, but also hire experience where necessary. We've got a lot of great examples of I was managing a sales team in Cincy and Columbus and Kentucky and managing marketing as well. And we really wanted to step up what we were doing in marketing, and so hired someone experienced to run an agency team. That's now grown to a team of 15, a creative director. And as we installed a BrowCon, a 60-barrel BrowCon from the 20-barrel system that we started out with, we hired a guy who had been at Golden Road and had done a transition very similar. And his leadership was really critical. We dumped one batch of beer in transition that wasn't to spec, and then hit the ground running with recipe formulations up, which has been really powerful. In breweries, everything is breaking all the time, so having the experience to have been through that and be cool, calm, and collected as everything is hitting the fan is really critical. And then thinking long term, this is more relevant now than ever. I think focusing on sales can be a very short-term strategy. We don't want to take the brand that we built that's so strong and let it and make a decision that impacts sales today for the brand integrity in the long run. And I think there's a real gray area on what you do and how you promote. Do you do billboards? Do you do sponsorships? Does someone win a helicopter ride for buying your beer in a sweepstakes? And I think we've drawn a line for what we feel like promotes our brand in terms of integrity and value versus just gets sales. And that long term is really important. And then fostering leadership. We've spent a ton of time on this in the last year, spending time with our leadership team, getting to break down silos between white collar and blue collar and between different parts of the organization, because decisions we make differently impact each part of the organization. And when you deal with the consequences of that in the same room, and we've done some role playing, we've done some empowerment versus entitlement, because we're very generous with our employees, but there's a line that you have to draw between that. And I think it's important for us as founders to define those parameters. And bringing the team together to talk, we do this a few times a year. And one of the things that we've done very early on is wanted to move towards some sort of employee ownership. And we don't know what shape or form that will take. But we get together with our all hands company twice a year. And 3 years into our operation, we started a valuation of the company, and we have a Geist Shares program where, on top of insurance and all the benefits and a third week of vacation, which we got the feedback people wanted, we now have Geist Shares that are given out to employees and dispersed each year that accrete as the value of the business grows. So we have this ownership mentality that's built in, and we're getting out of speaking and having our leaders do more of the speaking, which is really rich. Some of the quirky pieces of our organization, and this is the first org chart I think we've ever built. We obviously have brewing, packaging, quality, maintenance. We have a maintenance team of 11, 22 brewers, 22 in packaging, 8 in quality. Finance, sales, we've got, I think, 50 across the organization. Distribution, we have both in Cincinnati and Columbus. In marketing, we design all of our own apparel. We design POS. We do screen printing in-house. We print all of our tap handles and all of our sales materials for each of the wholesalers, and then we design templates so that our brand looks consistent across our market for wholesalers. We built a portal so that wholesalers can order all of this internally, and we fulfill it. That was the output of a supplier of ours saying, hey, we can warehouse all of your stuff and we'll just charge you this incremental premium to do so, and people can order it from us and we'll fulfill it. And my business partner flipping that and saying, well, why don't we just order in bulk, get the margins, and build a system so that we can deliver that? And that's actually worked out really well. Our event space is a team that manages an annex, a rooftop deck as part of the tap room, and then a wedding space. And they book over 500 events each year. We have 11 people in our merchandise team, 14 people in security. And we've been a brewery that's growing as a construction project. And sledgehammers are really bad for morale. But we've now put in all the tanks that we need to grow another 50% from where we are today, which gives us a nice run room and some quiet. We built in the last year a 40,000 square foot distribution facility with a 8.5 barrel innovation brew house within. And so to do that, we brought in one of the general contractors that we'd worked with to help us build out all of the planning and execute that build out. And as we move forward, if we ever built another brewery, this would be the team that would do that. And then Freightgeist, there's congestion and a lot of challenges with scheduling freight and costs going through the roof. So we, similar to self-distribution, just invested in a couple of semis, and we do all of our freight through our very kind of close-knit network. We also ship beer up to Boston as well. And Freightgeist will also, 40% of those loads we backload and bring other products back. It can be anything from ingots to lobsters. And then some of the things that I think, we're millennials and it's easy to give lip speak to this, but we really put humans first. Respect for others across the organization. We have a pretty hard line on that. In the early days, we hired someone from a much bigger brewery to manage a team, and we were having challenges in meetings because the team was very frustrated. And quoting them, they said, I'm not paid to keep people happy. And we completely disagreed with her because that is something that I think is really critical. We have created this amazing work environment, and if people aren't happy, let's figure out the reasons why and invest in that. A healthy work-life balance. We've forced people to take vacations because they've been burnt out. We really try and understand the complexities of life situations. With 300 employees and a mean age of 32, I think we've had 10 or 12 babies born this year. That affects work-life balance, and we try and be as accommodating as possible. We've got maternity and paternity leave plugged in. And a do-it-yourself spirit. We've got a woodworking team as well. This GABF booth, we invested in an end cap this year, not because we have any ambition to go out to the West Coast or Colorado even, but just because we really love celebrating this industry, the tradition, the respect for the brands that have come before us. And this was our woodworking team. We basically conceptually drew this up, put Shusugiban wood together with just a charred wood project, and built that, and we had the busiest JBF that we've ever experienced, and we did that ourselves. And then we have an education program where we have every employee is Cicerone beer certified, and we've got, I think, close to 25 employees now that have passed level on beer Cicerone. And we also do a scholarship. We've got a woman coming back from Germany who just went out there to be educated, and she's going to come back and join our brew team. And people basically apply for scholarships, and we'll invest in them as much as we can. That sensitivity to corporatization, it's such a fun industry that we work in, that meetings for the sake of meetings or processes that get in the way of actually making effective work get done, I think we've been pretty allergic to. And that may just be kind of an overcorrection from working in a big world where people are kind of mailing it in. And then vertical integration, I've described a lot of that. We like doing things ourselves. It gives upward mobility. We've got a lot of people that started out as drivers or on the packaging line that are now in leadership roles. And that's a picture of our Spring Grove facility, which is a combination of efficiency in that we've got 20,000 of cold space. We've got our POS fulfillment warehouse in there. And then in the corner underneath the logo there, we've got that 8.5 barrel brew house, which allows us. We were always doing 20-barrel batches, and we sell some of that in the tap room, and we sell some of that in self-distribution. But now we can actually iterate on beer that we were going to dump 4 out of 5 versions down the drain. But an example of that is we've got a beer called Andromeda that we didn't like the hop profile and how it expressed last year. So we did 5 different iterations, chose our favorite, and now that's going to be the tweak of the recipe that goes into the 1,000-barrel batch that we roll out in early January. And it's that sort of level of iteration that we're now going to be able to do. So what's going on in the future? And Andy spoke more articulately about this, but I think we really have to grow beer's appeal. It's a really complex environment. We can talk more about this, but what are the need cases what's cool about beer? And I think David touched on this earlier. We all carry a torch for the pride and quality and innovation that craft beer has become. And I think the 1,000 voices and all the levels of competition can be easy to fight against each other, and continuing to celebrate the craft and ingenuity and vivacity of the industry is really critical. Innovation and deciding what that means. Does that mean FMBs or seltzer, or what do you do? What is your definition of a brewery? I think will continue to be really critical. And then more harder work. We were leaving an era of growth where you slap more tanks in and you fulfill orders and beer sells out. And I think it's really competitive out there as overall growth is slowing as the industry matures. And it's really tough to do what we do, which is exciting. And then redefining growth. I think a lot of our identity is wrapped up in the 100,000 barrels in 5 years and the fast growth story, but that's really been an output rather than the goal. Our original business plan was something like 7,000 barrels in 5 years and 100,000 barrels in 20 years. And so we've way surpassed our expectations. But I think redefining growth in terms of what you want out of life and what do you want out of your company and the positive impact you make on our industry and on your community is really critical. So that was a brief and chaotic walkthrough. So now I'll get into the hot seat with Chris, who asks very insightful questions.
Round of applause for Bryant.
Water for you. Thanks.
Chaotic is a good way to describe it, but it sounds like your entire experience with Rhinegeist has been pretty chaotic.
Yeah, that's my specialty.
Yeah. Well, it shows. A lot to get through in a short amount of time. I gave you a challenge for sure. You guys, obviously the biggest thing that sort of stuck out to me was that you really don't like outsourcing things. You really like doing it yourself. You're very DIY.
Yeah. It's fun to challenge yourself. And it also it creates opportunity for agility. And our industry changes so quickly, we are able to communicate and go to market quicker because we're doing a lot of those things in-house. And we're creating jobs. That's one of the things that we are really proud of. We're creating a really great place to work for people doing all sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about, fabricating tap handles and T-shirts. I mean, I think somebody, when I went on the tour this summer at your facility, had mentioned that you guys like one of the largest T-shirt retailers or something in the state. Is that am I getting that partially correct?
I don't know the T-shirt market, but I know we do tens of thousands of them a year, and we can refine the types of printing that we do. Everything's in-house. We can now do holograms, which is pretty cool, or gradients, and we've got employees that are designing their own T-shirts, and they're just wearing them around, and they turn into T-shirts that we really like, and they get upvoted. So I think there's the upside of working in an environment that can embrace idiosyncrasy and the human side of people when you just can whip out a T-shirt, and it doesn't have to go through some serious process of corporate groupthink to get there.
Sure, and you talked about this idea of having a meritocracy. But how do you sort of avoid getting distracted with all these projects? You have a Freightgeist, you have a construction company, you allow people to just walk in and create random T-shirts and see if they pan out. A lot of those things can be quite distracting to the core business, which is brewing and selling beer at the end of the day. So how do you maintain that balance?
Well, we've been able to invest in leadership in those spaces. So, the same guy setting a sales plan is not focused on selling T-shirts. In fact, there's a distinction between them. Marketing is sort of the sinew between a lot of different groups, but the way that we basically set a clear vision and then hire great, hardworking people to execute that and not to get in the way of it. We've been a construction project, so it made sense to have a construction team.
Do you expect to do more similar things like that? Like, you don't need to be in the logistics business, but it made sense for you to get into it. You didn't need to be in the construction business, but it made sense. In what other areas do you expect to maybe grow in that same way, or do you not know yet?
Yeah, it's what's needed at the time we invest in. We don't really have ambition to further diversify, but as things come up, like that POS example, we're fulfilling it. We've now got a distributor portal, which were email orders with an attachment that was pretty dysfunctional before, so that's now more efficient. But we're not looking to problematize our life. We just like to hire people to create solutions and do things so that we can have great jobs.
And can the core beer business fund all these ventures, or how do you capitalize this stuff?
Well, I mean, we sell T-shirts, we sell POS, but yeah, our margins in self-distribution to some degree can help us invest in a lot of these positions. That might be a differentiator for us. I think we're one of the biggest self-distributing breweries in the country, and that connection with customers as well as margins to reinvest are pretty powerful.
Yeah, that certainly enables you to grow as fast as you have. Mm-hmm. You talked a lot about this idea of creating a sort of special culture internally, and kind of this sort of bottom-up philosophy of good ideas can come from everywhere. You can't be sitting at the sort of top of the pyramid and saying, like, we need to do a hazy IPA this week, and really empowering everybody in the organization to feel like their voice can be heard. What is sort of the secret to enabling people in any organization, be it a brewery or else another different company, to be able to speak up and say, hey, this is something that we need to be doing, and here's why I think that?
We just value that top down. We've always valued good ideas, and other perspectives sharpen your own. So that's just been since day one. What do you think? Top down. But we also, a lot of things as you scale fall apart or can, and personal relationships where, I'm studying the market and trying to figure out what is compelling and what should we get into. Hazy IPA is one of those places where I think it was polarizing for almost any brewery out there. The antithesis of what brewers have been doing for thousands of years. And yet, if you can create enough buy-in and try something out, there's space to do that. The innovation for us is really critical, but it's funny that we can make a beer in 2 weeks, we can sell a beer in 48 hours, but to market a beer and get it to market, it's more like 4 to 6 months if we're going to put it in a package. So to have innovation alignment across those three groups is really critical, so that we know what is the potential innovation space, what does that look like, and marketing is considering what brands and how they're going to be positioned in the market, what they should look like. Production is working on, we now have another innovation brew house. What iterations do we need to get there, changing one variable at a time to make sure we have something great? And then sales is incorporating that if we're going to pitch it to chains, or incorporating it into our volume planning. And you have to do that further and further in advance than when you're just a small group saying, all right, well, good idea on a Tuesday is happening a few days later when you're draft only. Now at scale, we really have to be focused on the same plan.
Yeah, you have to put the measures in place in order to enable success for any of these great ideas that might pop up. What sort of, for any brewery that's in the audience that's maybe looking at this and saying, gee, maybe I would want to expand in the same type of way that Rhinegeist has, not necessarily at the same sort of scale or at the same pace, but just with all the different projects and bringing things in-house and through these empowerment practices that you guys have instilled. How do you kind of take what you guys have done and supply a smaller brewery with the nuggets or the takeaways that they need to do it at a smaller scale? Where would you start if you were one of the 94% of breweries under 7,500 barrels that wanted to start a logistics business or a construction company or whatever it is?
Well, I think it's a balance of knowing what you're in it for and also being open-minded to feedback from within and from customers. We've had a lot of references to that. We had an original plan of 4 beers. We have 2 of those that are still in play. The market is so dynamic and waters are so choppy. I mean, we're focused on the impact of cannabis today, but what beyond cannabis into people just not going out anymore at all, to artificial intelligence that could be happening, autonomous cars over the next decade, that could radically change our business one way or the other. I don't think behaviorally people are going to get less healthy unless there's another great movie like Animal House that comes out and then it becomes cool again. But right now it's yoga and kombucha. So I would say know what you stand for and stick to your guns on that, but not to the extent that you can't accommodate the way what the market's telling you and what your people are telling you.
Yeah.
A lot of times my peak consumption years are behind me. My employees are closer to that than I am, and so getting their feedback is all the more critical as my relevant perspective wanes.
You mentioned that the sort of mean age of your employees is 32. Mm-hmm. What sort of advantages and disadvantages come along with such a young workforce?
You don't have a lot of wisdom, but I think we had a lot of experience on our founding team to know where beer has come from and to navigate those waters. But there's nearly boundless energy and passion. And a real connection. I think of people as like human dominoes. The 300 employees we have, each of them have 100 to 150 friends that know that they love to work for Rhinegeist. If they do, and that's a goal of ours, and if they know that they love to stand for something, those 100 people appreciate that as well. And you take 300 people and multiply that by that network, and in Cincinnati in particular, in Ohio, it's a very close-knit community. Word of mouth is really powerful. People still get together with their families on the weekends. There's not as much churn in population as what I experienced in San Francisco and the West Coast, where people go from other places. And I think that's really powerful to have people that have experienced and love what they're doing to the degree that they can impact others. And we're lucky in a market like that.
Yeah, well, you guys have certainly had a tremendous amount of success in a short period of time. It'll be exciting to see where you guys go from here and how you redefine growth, as you mentioned. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Russ.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bryant Goulding, everyone.